How have you made a rude person's day worse? Guy got out of his car to express some road rage to me. I just got out of my truck, walked past him, pushed the lock button on his door, closed it, walked past him again, his mouth hanging open this time, got back in my truck and drove off. He seemed to be frozen with confusion. I volunteer at my university. Safe walks and all that jazz. We are required to report suspicious and illegal activity. Witnessed a woman driving a Mercedes-Benz across a lawn to bypass the parking gate, tearing up this gorgeous lawn. Being an ex-landscaper, and mad at some rich BTCH being too cheap for parking. I'm not amused. So we reported it to the parking authority. They show up while the chick is still getting crap out of her trunk, box her in, and start writing a ticket. She ended up driving away, over a curb, peeling her bumper off in the process. Made me kinda happy inside. At the end of a long commute home, after a hard week, I went to a Miller's Cookies store just before closing time. As I walked up to the counter, not 5 feet from it, some guy ran from behind me and tried to cut in front of me. The girl working there insisted I was first. Thank you. Outraged at what that guy tried to do, and noticing there was not much cookies left, I said, hi, I'll take absolutely everything you have. Cost me close to 60, but it was so worth it. I work in customer service and have no shortage of ass customers. I often find that a nice big smile and a have a nice day at the end of an insulting customer's rant makes them angrier than any insult I could have thrown back at them. I work in local theater, and we have a lot of rude, awful women who are part of local ballet schools come through our venue who are the mothers of the dancers. Once this woman rang up wanting seats to an almost sold out ballet performance that had been on sale for 4 months the day before the show, and did nothing but abuse me for 5 minutes because she left buying them too late. Whined about how she shouldn't have to pay for her kids. Whined that we should get a bigger venue, it seats just under 500 minus. Then put me on hold while she rang 3 of her relatives to see if they wanted seats too. She was positively awful. The seats I was about to sell her were the only ones in the theater left, and they were good seats. While I'm on hold, a grandma of one of the ballerinas comes to the desk and asks if we have any seats left, as she'd been in hospital and couldn't buy them earlier, but said she'd understand if we were booked out. I put the phone with the on hold music down and sold this old lady the last seats for the show, and gave her an invite to our next year's dance season for her granddaughter and herself, so she'd know exactly when all the important dates were coming. She thanked me over and over, and she's now one of our regulars and brings her grandkids to our shows. 2 minutes after the old lady leaves, the bitch on the other end finally takes me off hold and says she wants the remaining seats that we have left. I tell her, sorry, we've just sold out while you had me on hold, I'm afraid. Better luck next year. Anything else I can help you with? She was choking with rage on the other end of the phone. It was fantastic. Was in theater quite a few years back, some action flick. I think Jean-Claude Van Damme, and there were 2 16-year-old or so kids in front of me who were, in turn, behind a group of smaller kids, say 12 or so. I was alone. The wife hates action movies. I quickly noticed that the 2 older kids were ducking with the younger ones kicking their seat backs, throwing popcorn at them, flicking spit at them, the works. The theater was crowded, so the little guys couldn't move. Finally, one of the Dutcher teens leans forward and I think flicked one kid's ear. When the little kid turned around to glare, flicking Dutcher teen says, "You got a problem with that, shithead?" His friend guffaws. When the flickmaster sits back, I haul off and give him a decent slap upside the head, knocking his noggin into his friends. They both turn and half jump out of their seats, and then pause when they see me. I'm 6'2", 225 pounds. I stood up and said, "You got a problem with that, shitheads?" They looked at each other and then turned to sit back down. I said, "You sit there, and I'm gonna make you as miserable as you've been making those guys in front of you." They shuffled on out of the theater. The younger kids all turned and said, "Thank you, sir." Too long didn't read, bitch slapped some teen bullies. Became action hero. When people are rude to me at my fast food job, I practically overflow their cup with ice. I'm a little passive aggressive. I also do this. Don't duck with the people that handle your food. I used to work for a major bank, and while doing my stint there I came across a ton of asses. I was taking a deposit for a lady and her daughter, and I heard them speaking a Middle Eastern language. At first I wasn't paying attention, but when I realized they were speaking Farsi, I was all ears. Reason I speak Farsi. They were talking about how much of a loser I was. How this job as a teller was the only thing I had in my life. That I probably didn't have a girlfriend, and didn't attend school. Throughout this conversation I spoke only English to her, and every time she responded to my requests she would smile, and then say something nasty about me in Farsi. At the end of the conversation, I switched up the language and said, "Just because I work at a bank doesn't give you the right to say things about me behind my back. I'm in grad school to become a psychotherapist and this job is for spending money. This isn't how Persian people behave, and you should be ashamed. Is there anything else I can help you with?" Her daughter Snap left the building and her mother was beet red, embarrassed, apologized profusely, and left. I never saw either of them again. Trashy. Jerry Springer guest looking young lady at Toys R Us on Black Friday tried to cut in the massive 90-minute line and threw a fit when she was told to go to the end of the line. She yelled at the employees and threw her products into the face of the security guards as she was told to leave. I started a slow clap, to which she replied, shrieking, "Duck oil." I was working as a shift leader in a Dunkin' Donuts, spent 2 years in that hellhole, and dealt with my fair share of rude assholes. One particularly memorable day, a group of ladies came in during our busiest hour, just past noon. The line was almost out the door and we were short-staffed, so it was pretty hectic. While they were ordering, one of them asked for a job application and started filling it out on the counter. She handed it back before they were done ordering, and I stashed it on a shelf under the register and started making their food. They had a huge order and we did our best to get it out quickly, but it was obvious from the looks on their faces that we just weren't quick enough for their liking. They sat down to eat their food, and the girl who just turned in her application got back in line. I spotted her right away. She was standing with a glaring face, crossing her arms and tapping her foot, trying her best to look obviously almost cartoonishly pissed off. So I motioned for her to come up to the counter, since I knew she had a complaint and I wanted to get it fixed right away. I assumed that in the shuffle we had messed up her sandwich or something like that. Anyone who's worked in fast food knows that these things happen when it's chaotic. I asked her what was wrong, and she pointed to her bottled Mountain Dew and barked, definitely not an indoor voice, "This is flat." It was a bit accusing, as though it were my fault that the bottle of soda she just opened was flat. So I took it and told her to get another one out of the cooler, then check it to make sure it was good. After all that, she asked for a refund. I said, as politely as I could, "Madam, I replaced your soda. Sorry if there was an inconvenience, but I don't think a refund should be necessary." Something like that. I don't remember my exact words, so she stormed, pissed off, back to her table and started complaining loudly to her group about not getting a refund. So, since I was having an awful day anyway and really could not see a bitch like this ever working for us, I grabbed her application from the register, walked it over to the lobby trash can nearest to her table, crumpled it up, and threw it away as she watched. The look on her face was ducking priceless. Too long didn't read. Lady comes in to order food and fill out a job application is a total BTCHI. Throw the application in the trash while she watches. My wife and I were on the receiving end of someone's justice. We'd gone out to a local sports bar restaurant for dinner on a Saturday night. Unfortunately, the local football team had just started playing, and the place was packed. While we were waiting in line, we heard the conversation between the folks in front of us with the hostess. "Hostess, how many?" "Guest 8. "Hostess, alright. We have you down. We are not quoting wait times right now as the game has just started, and we have no idea how long many of the diners will be staying." "Guest, so you're telling me you won't seat us?" It went back and forth for a few minutes, with the guest getting more and more indignant and the hostess trying to explain that they'd seat them as soon as possible. They just didn't know when that would be. And with a large party, the limited number of big top tables would make it worse. And the group was unwilling to split up into 2 groups. The guest finally moves, and it's our turn. We say there's just the 2 of us, and the hostess starts in on the "we can't quote times." My wife say, "Don't worry. We heard what you said to the last person. We are not in any hurry and we know how busy you are right now." We get our blinky alert box and find a spot to wait. We are expecting a solid 45 minutes. Literally 2 minutes later our box starts buzzing. We'd been bumped to the front and were being seated. The best part is that when we got to our table there was another empty table right next to it. The 2 tables could have sat the group of 8, but the hostess and waitresses made sure to not seat them. Oh, and the wings were delicious. Some douchebag in a Humvee decided to park in a handicap spot at a Kroger. I was young at the time and out riding with my dad, a repo man, in a repo truck. He towed the Humvee to a parking spot on the opposite side of the parking lot. We waited till the owner came out and looked around in disbelief. She thought someone stole her car. My dad drove up to her, rolled down the window, and said, "Are you okay, miss?" Woman said, "My car was stolen." My dad replied, "Well, maybe you shouldn't have parked it in a handicap spot," and drove off. I work in a university computer lab. In all of the lab rooms we have it clearly posted "no food, no drinks." I've repeatedly told a particular group that is in the journalism program to at least clean up their mess in the lab room, designated for their class only. They never do, and I end up cleaning the mess. The other night I go to lock up that particular lab room and they have left a mess and Fox News running on the TV in there. Just went ahead and put a channel lock with passcode on it the night before election day. Well, this was one of my favorites. Being a cop in a small town, I would get a few large parties, 150 plus kids, with a lot of kids coming from outlying areas. I'm generally pretty nice to the young adults who live in the area I police, and am generally well liked. But to the kids who come from different towns to party, well, they obviously don't know like me. Anyhow, this one party, I pull up and start walking around, turning a little bit of a blind eye to the underage drinking. I talk to the homie owner's son parents away and just ask him to try and get rid of some people and move the party indoors and close the windows, as there have been too many neighbor complaints. He says he'll do what he can do, all nice and cordial. Anyhow, this one punk standing there with a lucky beer in his hand starts mouthing me off and bragging to his buddies. Just average shit like, "Hey pig, eat any donuts yet?" And just generally swearing and saying how I can't do shit about what he's saying, and that I can't arrest him for dip as he's on private property. Dip drunk in public place. I don't give him any satisfaction of acknowledgement. I have a thick skin, else I wouldn't be a cop. But I had other calls to attend to, so left no further complaints from the party, as the homie owner asked many people to leave. A few hours later I'm driving back to the office donut free, and pull over a car for doing 15km/h over the limit on the highway. Usually I give cars at least 20km/h on the highway before pulling them over as well. That's what I normally do on the highway. Wouldn't be right to give people tickets for something I do all the time. Well, it's the dipshit driving who'd been mouthing me off. Amazing how nice he was to me at this point in time. Complete attitude change. I didn't let him know that I remembered him from the party, and I now had his name and vehicle plate, so I could always look out for him in the future. Long story short, he got tickets for speeding, only having one active headlight. Failure to display an ensign new driver law here. N on rear of vehicle lets other drivers know this person just got his license. Having more than one non-family member passenger, another new driver law. And not wearing a seatbelt, as I remembered him drinking. I also demanded a roadside breathalyzer test. He wasn't drunk, but had some alcohol in his system. So I also give him a 24-hour roadside prohibition from driving, and towed his vehicle. I slept well that night. Also, 3 months later, after running his license on our system, the insurance company had prohibited him from driving for 3 months. Heard this from a DJ in my hometown. He's pushing his cart of groceries out of the store and over to his car when a woman pulls into the handicapped spot in front of the store. No placard, no handicapped plates. Jumps out of the car without so much as a limp and heads into the store. He gives her the stink eye about taking up a handicapped spot, and she snarls deal with it and sashays into the store. The guy's pissed. He sees a couple of cops who were leaning against their cars talking. They hadn't seen it, so he goes over and tells them the story. They smile and say they'll handle it. He puts his groceries in his car, and as he's pushing his cart back to the store to put it in the rack, good guy DJ, he sees the cops have blocked the lady's car with this and were leaning against their car waiting for her. As he's putting his cart in the rack, the lady comes out of the store with her purchase, sees the cops, and almost shits. The fine in CA is $250, $500 for a first offense. Priceless. He walks over to her and says, I dealt with it. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.